Moshe, I would start with a question to you. So I just start to kick off the discussion, but I'd be very happy if you guys from the audience would also jump in. Moshe, one quick question to you. Now you saw a little bit of where the industry is. There's lots of solutions, lots of people on the tech side that actually start to offer stuff, but some of the organizations that actually could make use of it are not really ready. So from the perspective of your organization, are there any tips or recommendations what you would do if you start to the endeavor of working with open source projects? Or what you would not do, just if it's not too big, but just...
Very difficult question, I guess, especially as you're in such a very interdisciplinary domain. I think the collaboration aspect is probably the most important thing to really bring in that kind of culture of collaboration into the people within a company, so that they are. I was impressed by this, by the collaboration platform with the 3D. Sorry, I have to speckle to tweak a little bit. That people are able to engage and to collaborate on such platforms in a very close way. Also with the Inoska project, where they are able to work on the same platform. And the more you get on the same platforms, the better. I would say do it internally is easier for a lot of people. If you have a lot of open-minded folks, you can go wild to the open source world, or if they come from research area, they grew up with that open spirit and collaboration spirit, I would say. But otherwise, start small and then do more.
Alex, can you give us some insights into this? Because have you been heavily working with open source solutions before with Speckle, or did this really also trigger a different kind of discussion?
So basically, it started with Speckle, and we implemented it because initially we had lots of coding projects that are very coordinated, also not basically the whole infrastructure, like also this agile principles and so on, nothing was set up. So we are starting now organically in getting into this direction. But the open source aspect is very critical for us. We need it because there are already people aspects of it, but the issue is everything we are building, and this is the industry issue itself, we are not allowed to share outside of our firms. Because we have low margins in the AEC industry, like design fees, which are very low, competitors who are basically trying to make it for half of the money. And then management, doesn't matter if it's a design firm or a contractor, are saying like, yeah, but it's our money, so why should we give this outside, this investment we are bringing to the firm? This is, I see it in that way that maybe a cooperation between firms can solve this, because this is the only way I see it right now.
Mm-hmm. Like a cooperation of other engineering companies that say, okay, we have the same problem, a little bit like with the...
Exactly.
I think also licensing is an important aspect in this whole topic. Like if you're concerned about this and the people who provide your money are afraid that it's going to be just used against your interest, I think a strong copyleft license can help, which essentially forces people that work with it to contribute back their improvements. And then you can sort of form an alliance, and while the big players are hiding all what they are doing, a small group of maybe more open companies can overtake them silently by collaborating.
Probably one more question in a somewhat similar direction. Like you said, you have built up this knowledge hub, for example, or like you did have other digital projects in the company that were initiated a couple of years ago. Aren't there some learnings that it's what I also mentioned in my talk before? You kick off something, it looks good at the beginning, but to maintain it is really difficult. And I think is this an argument for the management actually to think differently?
Exactly, but we are not at this stage. We have to first realize that it's not just a setup. So first, let's go way back to what I said. We developed once a plugin. Basically, the thought of the local manager was like, this is a tool they can do, and then it's finished and it works. And this is like the simple idea of now I can use it and updates, But the reality is there are bugs in it, then you have to improve it. Then this is the point that the software company released a new version, and it was a complete new API. So all those thoughts were left out, and now this tool is not used anymore in the code base. So this is also this realization of that. But management talk and developer talk, this is like
what we actually try to make easier in the future. Tom, you want to?
Well, but maybe there is also a difference between adopting open source as part of your toolkit and developing open source solutions yourself, right? Because if you as a company can rely on the fact that there is a community out there that creates solutions that are being kept up to date, that are constantly tested because many people use them, so, and you build on top of that, then half of that development cost is actually carried by the community. Right? So I think we also all need to stop thinking of open source as it's an all or nothing kind of thing. We have to do then everything open source and everything we build needs to then be given to it. That's also not the case. Right? So I think if as a company you can kind of offset the cost of proprietary software, etc., by an internal small development cost on top of something that is being maintained by a community, then we have a good balance between the two.
The trick is to establish this community. This is you've mentioned that with Compass, but it's like really hard because usually when you're doing something, this is very specific. It's not just a component, but it's like a tool which solves maybe beam verification, simple example. But this is a finished product, and if this tool makes it better than what is on the market, then someone else thinks like, okay, why should I develop it further and just take it? And maybe someone maintains it, but yeah, it's not. This is the tricky part to establish that. And Spectre is doing a great job with it, you are doing a great job with it, but not everyone. Then those projects die also.
Maybe to come back to the point regarding what to open source or what not. What we are using a kind of little pyramid diagram, so having open source at the wide area, and then in the middle inner source, and on top closed source. And then we use examples that people know across the company. That we, for example, for our PLC engines, the source code is closed source, and there you have just a handful of people within the company with access to that piece, because that's kind of super important knowledge for the company. Then within the inner source area, it's kind of user interface frameworks or documentation themes or different kind of stuff, or temporary local forks from open source components happens as well. That everyone can access, and then we have the open source world. And thinking about this and putting out why belongs this part of software to the closed source area or not, or to the inner source area or to the open source area, is also worth to do that exercise. I would recommend that exercise if you're in such a situation where the competitors could take our stuff.
So Tom, probably one question to you, because you have insights in both, in like the GIS world, but also the architectural world. Like, what would be your impression on the quality of the tech stack that companies bring with it? Because I think it's the exact right discussion to have, but you need to have some foundations to talk about it. If you just purchase software products and install them as like desktop solutions, there's not so much to kind of integrate or do about it.
Well, okay. Yeah, I think it's very different worlds, but I see a lot of momentum in the kind of AEC part of it, because it's very visual usually, right? So a lot of people are interested in working on it. And on the geo side, it's usually less sexy, so it's less nice or less aesthetic, let's say. So there's a lot more foundation that has been laid earlier on, so 30 years ago, like Matthias said. And in the AEC world, I think it's much younger, but there is much more momentum. So there's a lot of libraries like IFC.js or the Open Community that is here, like Spectral, like IFC OpenShell, that is kind of the basis for Blender Vim, right? So there's a lot of stuff that is happening fairly recently, and you saw a lot of the timelines that were very short, actually. So I think the momentum actually helps because it's very small, yes. So you have a lot of influence right now. Like if you want to get in and you have an idea and you want to change something, it's very easy right now. Whereas in other worlds, like in geo world, it's not so easy actually. Like it's very defined. It's very, it's even encoded in law essentially. So basically, that's a lot more static. That's what I see.
I have one more question before I would open up the round to the audience. Probably Oshe and Christian can answer it separately. Because we talked, like we know that there's some compliance issues and stuff, but also the fear of giving know-how away. Is this something that also that you realize with people in your company that say?
Of course. Of course. That's why I think it's so important to really understand what is differentiating your business and what not. Because let's say to make an existing piece of software running, let's say on an ARM CPU architecture that is running on x86 already, this is not the game changer from a business offering perspective. But thinking about those things and also have the conversation also with the business sponsors or with product managers that are driving the next generation and so on is essential from my perspective. And then it's a topic you have to solve together and to talk about to really understand what is differentiating. And the more they understand, the more they see, if we don't contribute back, we end up with a maintenance nightmare in that area, and this is not a business critical thing. So we should contribute back and better spend the money in another area that is more important for our business.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that. My experience is a bit that it's a lot like culture and personal mindset that matters more than anything else. Often when you ask people why shouldn't we do open source, and it's more like a sort of discomfort which is holding them back. Other people are just open and they go for that. I think in our cantonal community, it's perfect. It's a no-brainer because there's no competition. They don't have to compete, right? They should collaborate. And still, there are people in charge of those projects who have this discomfort. And if you don't spend the time to listen to them and really try to find out where does it come from, then it might lead to decisions which are, from our perspective, not easy to comprehend.
Thanks a lot. Probably, Antonio, because you're sitting in the first row, if I might ask a question also to you, because you started now doing everything open source. Probably if you could give us just a couple of insights, so why you, or like whether you debated to do something proprietary in the beginning, or what actually was the driving thoughts behind being that open, as the name of your company says from the beginning.
To be completely honest, when I started IFC.js, it was just a pet project, and my only goal was to build an IFC viewer. And the fact that a whole community gathered around it, and much smarter people than me show up and offered help, taught me that open source was a very effective way for getting better in software development, because it was a way that allowed you to suddenly get in touch with people working at NASA or with people working in huge companies that suddenly were super friendly because they were, that's how it started. The reason why we are making everything open source now is because, in our opinion, of course, we think that the reason why the software industry looks like a couple of decades older than the software in other industries is because we are literally inventing the wheel over and over and over again. And it's complete nonsense, in my opinion. The fact that each big software company has created all the know-how, all the software from scratch, is like saying that each car company has invented the car from scratch. And this has two consequences. Of course, the first one is that the software works, because to get to a specific point in quality of software, you need to go to very far. You need to invest. I mean, how much does it get to create a Revit? 20 million lines of code, so it's very hard, right? And if you're starting from scratch, of course, it's hard. And the second consequence of this is that it's very hard for new players to enter this market and compete. And that's the very reason why, in my opinion, there are so many startups having a very, very hard time competing and putting up a product that doesn't feel naive or at least less mature with the products of the big guys. It's not because you know, their technology is bad or anything. It's because if you play a game in which everything is starting from scratch each time, it's very hard to compete with the other players because they have 30 years or 40 years of advantage, right? In my opinion, if we manage, you know, automation is trendy. Everyone is talking about automation, right? What if we take each thing that we need in our industry, things like a geometry engine, things like a clash detector, things like that, and we solve those problems for everyone, just once. Because in that moment, it's going to be no, I mean, everyone is talking about, oh, the next generation of, or the killer for Revit I was talking before, right? If we had a geometry engine, that wouldn't be a problem because we would already see 20 competitors trying to create that alternative because creating a geometry engine is not easy, right? So, in my opinion, open source is the future, and it's the only option for our industry to stop having software that looks 2 decades older than we're. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. I think we touched this topic before. One just one quick thought about the infrastructure. Like when we do open source, I don't think it's really the end user application first that we should start with, but like the infrastructure that is used by many people, and that's not a key differentiator, which makes it much easier to adapt it from different people and also to contribute back to it. John?
Yeah, just it relates a little bit to what you were saying, and also what you were saying is that I'm really convinced of the fact that protecting knowledge and know-how is actually the worst way to be able to claim that you developed it. Because if you manage to develop something that solves a certain problem and you don't allow other people to use it, somebody else will do the same thing. It will happen. You're not the only smart guy around or technically gifted or whatever. And so, but as soon as you put a product out there that works and keep working on it, there is no need for people to then do this again. Right? It's a lot easier to just contribute to the solution that is already there or just use it. So I think it's also just an old way of thinking that if you develop something that you need to own it by protecting it and not giving it away. It's the most certain way of giving it away actually. So nobody will now make another IFC.js. It's just a lot easier to use the one that is already there. Right? Nobody else will make a new open cascade or something like this, or whatever. They will use what is there. So I always believe a little bit that it's not really about these tools, but it's what you do with it as a company. Right? If the only value to your company is this little bubble that you created, it's not such a valuable company to begin with. But if you use a lot of tools and you create value with those tools, then that's a much more sustainable business model for everyone, also for your own company, I think.
What I can add to that is what you said, like we have now this ping pong effect. Like, lots of, in a small time frame, lots of things which popped up. And this is the change to what was before that. So like, let's take a look 10 years back. So we are currently in this changing procedure. And also, like, there are not so many design firms who are doing actually the coding. So it's like, it decreases also a bit, but it's like our industry is slow. Like, take a look back, like IFC to Extreme, 25 years it's still in use. So people still are not able to use it properly. So. Yeah.
Maybe one small thing to add, it does go all the way to the end user sometimes. So for instance, for us, a lot of common issues is like in many software is importing the IFC models, right? And one really nice way for us to say is, yes, but we are relying on IFC OpenShell and just open it in Blender and see the issues, then we don't have to provide a whole range of checks and so on. I mean, we do some, but we can say open it in something that uses the same underlying infrastructure, and if you're not happy, then here's a way to contribute, or hand in a bug request, or tell us and we do whatever, but basically we can share that and don't have to say, it's doing some black magic to import the IFCs, right? So.
That's one part where I think open source is really exciting right now. First, because many companies like yours and others are just on the edge of implementing a proper IT stack and a framework that would allow you to rework with this. Plus the different kind of discussion that you can have from a software provider with your customers. And be much more open and make them also understand of what's going on under the hood. And I think probably for you guys it's also easier to work with Stack because it's so transparent and you really know who's behind the project, why are they doing it, what are they doing it, and you can just build up some trust. Which is quite important if you endeavor a new framework or just a new area of X. That you would not have the expertise yet in the company. So, a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions? Probably let's start with somebody shot up first.
It's really nice to see a lot of open source discussion around here. So, I've been involved with open source for 20 years back in Nokia times when we tried the Nokia. We ventured into something called Bitcoin, that one. What I would like to also emphasize at this stage is that it is not enough to have an open source tool, but it's also important to have an open standards and then open data. So because there is a lot of incompatibility in the construction sector at this stage. So the open data and the open standard and even the terminologies are different. So I think this is creating a huge problem at this stage. So I think it's important that there is also a standard data, which is based on open standards, and also there is also an initiative to have some open data to be available outside. So that's one thing I would like to add. And if there is someone discussing about this one, I would be happy.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, especially in the realm of product data, I think Chandra is really a good person to talk to. You were also asking a question, right?
So all of these advantages of open source are great, and I almost agree with all of them. That's why I'm here. But they all seem targeted at like companies. So what do you do when you're not the head of a company? What do you do when you're just a single employee within a company? Like somebody mentioned, I think in their presentation, being a single person in a bigger company that can code. So what do you do in that situation?
You just go rogue and show to the boss that you're awesome because you use it.
Find other people with the same mindset. I guess that's the most important thing. I'm pretty sure if you're a bunch of developers and as soon as you find people with a similar mindset that want to go that direction and so on, then you find someone within your crew that is ready to present to the manager why we want to do this and why it's important. Often also, companies might have tons of policies. You have to do this approval, this approval, this approval, this approval until you're allowed to contribute to an open source project. They do it anyway. To be honest, it's so easy to do on GitHub, a little fork, zack, boom, done, my problem is solved, instead of go through all that procedure. But of course you have to fight a little bit internally and convince the people on the why. And I guess here today you get a lot of material you can use then to convince the people within your company because others are doing and they are fast.
Or if it's not a big company, because you said one person, you could try the same, probably harder, but you could try the same across companies, right? So if there's a bunch of smaller companies, and you probably know a couple of the people, then maybe that's also a path to say, yeah, there is a project, maybe it's not from the get-go completely sponsored and completely supported. Maybe there needs to be a bit of incubation at the beginning that is your time and your kind of effort, but could also work. Then the pool increases potentially, but also maybe the support increases over time because more companies.
And probably if I can also add something, that's actually exactly the reason why we started opensource.construction, because speaking as a single voice to others in a company with no idea is much different if you can point out to software, or like project-driven communities, or like a more neutral community like opensource.construction, where we kind of try to transport the concepts of open source in their means to expand, like managers in your company say, hey, I'm not the only one, there's a group of people that talk about it, go and inform yourself, just to get a bit more support to do stuff like this.
Maybe I have a question, what kind of company are you from? So structural, civil? Structural. So that might also be the thing that going rogue is a bit tricky, because it's can be also a reason for getting sacked. But the thing is, like jumping on something which is already there, and basically improving it or creating a product out of it, and showing them basically in a simple case that this can be a thing. Maybe from that perspective, because it doesn't matter which industries, like the tech aspect, like it's open source, they don't care about it, especially in the AEC industry. But if you show like we have built this based upon that, and this is minimal effort in comparison to if I would have done it completely by myself, and this is the business case for you, that people are able to use it, and you don't have to invest too much development time. So like this, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I think open source per se is not a quality at all. It's really about the product that you can do much better or easier or with minimalized effort. Because just trying to convince someone to go open source just to do it, it's not really helpful in that discussion.
Approach, because I'm in a similar situation. I'm in a middle-sized architecture office, and architects works for architects, and programming is not a big deal. And I started with reducing my work time in the architecture building, and trying on myself some solutions, some simple examples, and then go back to them and show them like solutions, what can help and improve and help others. And then I got more and more involved in this. They were more open to invest in this direction. Yes, like for me it works well by first reducing, do my own thing, and then with coming with solutions or ideas.
That's a little bit what I meant with going wrong. It's not so extreme as put the company upside down, but if you can show that you do certain things a certain way and they're more efficient and you can do it faster, and then you can maybe make the case to your boss, like, look, I've been using these tools and it works really well and I'm fast and efficient, and maybe that's a good starting point.
Another question for me.
Maybe add something further. What also would help is, because what we see is like people develop tools and they don't scale. So this is especially when you have, for example, something Python. We are getting there and it's getting better, but it's still a minority. It's like the same minority like Roundtable uses, even less. So if you get something done which scales easier because people don't hate it while using it, then this can also be something which helps in a discussion. And it's not just your case, but it's the case of the firm.
I would have a two-part question. First one is if there is an open solution for everybody, or everybody kept bringing his own solution to the problem, how do you track and follow up all the different solutions that are in the market? And on that, at the end, someone will use it. Someone will use the software to do some kind of task. How do you scale it? Or how do you deal with the user interface and teaching the people who are using the software? When they switch company, they switch inside the same company, they are using different tool, and they need to learn it first to be productive.
Well, if I may,
yes.
The learning part of software is true for any software, right? Open source, proprietary, I mean, you have to learn how to use your tools, kind of. the success of an open source project, I guess in that sense also stands or falls with the documentation that is available and whether there are tutorials and step-by-step guides and so on. So I don't know about all of the other aspects, but ideally the solution that you're trying to use has some kind of online presence through which you can learn certain things. But I would argue that, I mean, if people say that they don't want to use open source tools because they need to learn how to work with them, they have to learn how to use all the other tools as well. Right? So,
no, because there's few softwares on the market, and if you switch company, they probably use the same software. So you're going to have to learn every time you give to a new.
Yeah, but you don't need to relearn how to use open source tools. If you switch company, you probably have a set of tools that you like working with, and you take them with you, so to speak, right? So it's not as comprehensive as the proprietary solutions offered by really big AEC companies that are then available already. But for example, interacting with those tools through an API or something like this is something that is the same for all of these tools. So I'm just saying that there is a level of learning involved in all these things. People are just a little bit afraid of opening their terminal and typing a command or something like this, but I mean, nowadays that is equally easy as using any other tool. So I think it is also just a little bit of a mindset of you get taught certain things at school, and then you take them with you in your professional life. But nowadays you also are taught different things at school, and so maybe more programming oriented or maybe a little bit more flexible too. So I don't know. I think the learning aspect is always there.
Maybe something to add to this. I see the same a little bit sometimes. I guess for techies like us to do the command line and then you do the DevOps and this and that, that's the thing, easy. But I guess if you collaborate with different kind of people that are not so techy nerdy as we are, they fear the command line terminal. I guess they were working since many years on tool XYZ from vendor X, and also to collaborate with the other teammates who somehow must use the same tool, I guess. Otherwise, you're kind of the exotic boy with the command line. But if you're able to demonstrate more productivity or do stuff better because you're a nerd and using the open source tools and convince the others, that would be amazing. But I guess those tools are kind of so heavily widely used that everyone is fluent in using them. I guess there's a little bit of challenge in front.
Well, and specifically with Spectral, for instance, I think it's a really good case for things getting more compatible rather than less. I mean, it's in the interest of the vendors that it's not compatible, right? But something like Spectral, I think, really lowers that barrier. So you can use a different tool that maybe only you use, which, yes, has the precondition to use something like that, like an exchange platform, but it could really help you to say, no, I have my tool set, I'm really comfortable with it, I want to try something new, or I want to switch to something. I think it really helps that as a case. And eliminates a bit this legacy kind of momentum of training. Yes, it's a thing that people don't necessarily want to switch. I mean, why is Adobe still so big? Because everyone knows Adobe software, right? And there's other solutions on the market. Not so much open source great tools, but there are other tools. No one will switch even if they keep increasing the price because training. Right? But something like Spectre, I think, really makes that really easy. So if you use Blender and someone else uses Archicad, not necessarily an issue.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I would like to conclude the official roundtable here. And I have to say that I'm I'm really happy with what we discussed. I think the quality of discussion is really cool, so I'm very confident that we can make something out of it. And we have plenty of time and opportunity to do so on the weekend. And but before we end, I would like to give all of the speakers a quick gift and probably a big round of applause again to everyone.